Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Curiosity Key podcast. I'm joined with Clare Stead. Clare, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Charlie, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's really exciting to be here.
Brilliant. So, as you may have guessed, if you have been listening to this podcast for a while, or if you're new, that I am all about education. And I believe that through technology, we really are going to be able to change the world. And Clare has a very interesting story and an interesting product of how she's using technology to achieve that. So, Clare, do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about you and also about Aliki?
So I am a mum of three, a teacher, an education researcher, an e-learning specialist, and an app developer. I think that's the list. And I have developed an app for parents in the first 1,000 days of life. So that's from conception right the way through to the time the baby is 2, to help the babies build their brain, a strong brain, but help parents find the learning in everyday play and build their parental confidence in the process of playing.
Love it. And I think I can't even remember how we got talking. I think, was it before I had my baby or after I had my baby?
I think he might have been 4, 5 days old, like tiny. And how we actually started talking was a friend of mine said, "Oh, have you heard of Charlie Wyman?" So I looked you up, we started chatting, and then it turns out that you just had a baby. So it was all like, wowie, all there we are. You see,
I love it. Because, you touched on a really important point about learning and experience and it really being, a key part of helping us grow and helping us develop. So why is it so important to get that learning and that experiential learning right from the very early days?
Well, the brain science is it's been out for a while. Clever people who do brain science have known about the brain science for a long while. Sort of 2000, there was a big push to sort of bring out the information, and quite a lot was published. And in that publication by Jack Shenkoff and C.A. Nelson, I don't unfortunately know Mr. Nelson's first name, they produced a graph, and this graph shows the learning in the first 1,000 days of life, and it is absolutely bonkers. So if we have a graph like this, I'm probably doing it backwards now, but basically from conception, you come along, and then you get this amazing bulge up the top here, and then it comes down and it goes flatlining down here from about 5. So you have this amazing, what they call a window of opportunity of learning that happens in those first 1,000 days of life, where our babies are actually primed to be learning machines. And they learn through experience and the experiences that we provide them. So by enabling them to have fabulous, rich experiences, we are actually laying the foundation for every single bit of learning that goes on. And when our babies are born, they have 25% of their brain capacity, but by the time they're 3, they have 90%. And so in that, we can see during that window of opportunity, you've just got this prime moment when we can just lay those foundations for life. And so by helping parents who, after all, are not qualified, don't necessarily have any experience of babies except when they were a baby, or their nieces and nephews that they happen to have jiggled up and down a little bit but not done much with. If we can help them really understand the learning that happens, not the ABCs, I'm really not talking about that, I'm talking about how play is providing those experiences. And if we help parents understand those experiences as they go along, they develop their child's skills, knowledge and understanding, so that when they get to school, they've really got a great baseline for starting. So it's not about getting your baby to go shooting off and understanding the hundredness of 100. It's actually having a very rich understanding of the threeness of 3 and getting that real strong base core, that foundation really laid strongly, because it impacts those first 1,000 days of life, impact your education outcomes, your academic outcomes, your wealth, your health, your social outcomes, in fact, your whole life. So it's fundamental that we do as much as we possibly can to make that first period really rich. And also, you're building a relationship that lasts a lifetime. So best to make it a great relationship, because then it's a happy outcome, isn't it, for everybody?
Exactly. And I think it's really bonkers in one way that, experience is so important. And, every single child learns, like you said, through experiencing different things around them, by watching, being really, really curious. Yeah, in certain school environments, I know that my school environment did not promote curiosity in any sense of the word. Constantly being told like, oh, Charlie's just that annoying kid that keeps asking questions. And it's all very suppressed. And then you get into the workplace and a lot of training is delivered, kind of sort of sit in a classroom and just be talked at. A lot of the training that I do, I try to embed as much experience as possible, because that's how you learn. Like, I am not a trained marketer, yet somehow I've ended up in this like a wonderful career of marketing for the companies and then teaching people marketing. And it's just through, getting hands-on, sort of experiencing it and playing in one way, being allowed to play and having the freedom to play.
I think play is the root of all learning. And I think I went to a really interesting conference at the Peddle Institute in Cambridge, which is the Institute for research into play. And honestly, it's fabulous. It's got fab stuff. You have these amazingly moving and deep intellectual papers that are being delivered. And everybody's sort of, very serious. And then, because they have partnered with the Lego Foundation, they also have playful interludes. And I mean, honestly, who doesn't want to play in this environment? Who doesn't want to go to work in that kind of environment? And so they had, at this particular conference, the first one they held, they had one of these playful interludes, and on each chair was put a little packet of 6 pieces of Lego. I'm doing a nice Lego advert here. Anyway, but they do really want play to take place, and they're really backing that. Anyway, we had these 6 little pieces of Lego, and the first activity was to make a duck. And the second activity was to turn to your partner and turn that 2 ducks into 1 duck. But what happened, it was really interesting to watch this academic, very erudite room explode into communication, creativity, comparison. We were comparing and contrasting, we were questioning, we were investigating, and suddenly all this learning was taking place, all this communicating was taking place through 6 Lego blocks. Now, if we then extrapolate that out into all learning that takes place, and I'm talking workplace learning as well as child-based learning, how much more would we achieve in a day if we made our working environment playful? If we made our school environment playful, and we expected our children to be allowed to investigate, inquire, and be inquisitive, and that failure was only seen as the beginning of success. And so, I mean, if you get me onto schools, well, then you've got me on my pet thing already. I think it should be playful. I think it should be learning through play that we prize more than anything else, because at those places, that's the edge of innovation and creativity. And our children are the most creative and innovative beings until we stop that and make them academic, focused, written, handwriting, underlined dates. We stop them learning almost. Well, we certainly stop them being creative by forcing them to go down our school route. And what I'm trying to do is help parents start the journey creatively. And if parents start the journey creatively and through play, and really get the importance of play, maybe what they'll do is knock on the door of schools and say, this isn't okay. And that
would be amazing.
Yeah, because until we have that revolution, and maybe that revolution is going to come with our babies and our parents. And if we have a revolution, we can change our outcomes. And we are in the 21st century where we have no idea what new jobs are coming or what new skills are needed. So how can we educate our children in a way that was created way back in the time gone by to suit something, an environment that was then, how can we do that now and expect really good outcomes?
Just got to promote curiosity. I firmly believe it's all about curiosity. I mean, we've spoken at length before, and I talk a lot about LinkedIn. I didn't go on any formal training program on how to use LinkedIn. It is just a tool, but by playing with it, experimenting, trying new things, just getting involved, I've now found myself where people see me as an expert. I hate that word, but like a specialist in that platform. And it's like, you've just got to allow yourself the time. But time is one of those precious commodities that, when you're at work now, you don't always have. I've been very fortunate in my life and my career. My parents were my advocates at school. They were kind of, what are you talking about? She can't ask too many questions. Like, let her ask questions and answer them. You're the teacher. And then, in my working life, I've had, mentors and bosses that have encouraged curiosity. And it's allowed me to do what I've been able to do. So yes, I couldn't agree with you more. But you're talking about Lego. If anybody's listening now that wants to learn a little bit more about Lego, one of my earlier podcast guests, Rebecca Godfrey, she is a Lego serious play trainer, and she goes into corporates and very highly regulated industries and helps them use Lego as a tool for creativity and leadership. So definitely worth checking out that episode. So I'm really keen to talk to you, Clare, about you're obviously very, very passionate about what you do, and, you're on a mission to change the world and change the way that people see this. So what prompted you to think, right, I'm going to develop my own app and bring that to market? What was that kind of...
If I'd known.
How did that happen? Tell me about it.
Okay, so I'm a teacher by training. I'm one of those people that played schools at the age of 5. I knew at 5 I wanted to be a teacher. But then education and I fell out. Around about teens, GCSE level, it all went a little bit wrong. And I discovered what failing in education was like, and it's rubbish. I then took O-levels, because I'm that old, from 14 to 19 every year, twice a year. And I got my 12, but I got every one of them on a different certificate. And it was through sheer darn hard work and tenacity that I got there. I did my A-levels, and then it was, well, what are you going to do? And it was, well, I want to be a teacher. And they genuinely laughed at me. So I went to the universities, and they said, why should we take you? And I said, well, I wouldn't if I were you, but if you do, I'm going to be a good teacher because I know what failure's like. And they did. They all took me, which was very nice of them. And off I went, and I trained to be a teacher. And I trained from 3 to 8. And I just loved it. And I found my space. And all this challenge of education just melted away. And I found my voice, and off I went. And I went through university and came out the other end. And went back to school, obviously, because I was now a teacher. And I just loved having a class of children, and I worked around the world. But I always worked in those schools that most people don't really want to work in, the more challenging environments. And I love that kind of environment. But the child for me that has always been a curiosity, a fascination, is the child that should be accessing the learning but just isn't. And there's no special needs, there's not a problem, they're just not able to access the learning, or they don't want to, or their behavior's not great, or there's something getting in their way that's stopping them soar and fly. And so those were always my area of interest. I've always said I know nothing about anything, but I know a lot about learning. And if I can help you find your passion for learning and your passion, ignite your passion, then I've helped you do what you need to do. And that was my job as far as I was concerned. And then I decided to had a baby. And in those days, that meant if you wanted to go back part-time to teaching, you were the special needs teacher, which is fine. And loads of people are really good at it, but it just isn't my bag. And it was for me on day 3, when I found myself in a corridor doing year 5 disaffected boys persuasive writing using a worksheet that had been given to me by their teacher. I hate worksheets. And at the top of the corridor, there was reception doing bikes and trikes down a ramp. towards us. That was it. And it was like, no, I can't do this anymore. That was day 3. So then I went round to my then county advisor, who was now doing something different, but I didn't know quite what it was, and said to her, do you have a job? She said, yeah, actually I do. And I was on Monday, I was on a secondment, and I was now an education researcher, and I was working with the top 5% of schools in England and Wales, looking at best practice and trying to roll that best practice out across all the schools in the country, and initially we were trying to impact the top group of kids, because at the time gifted and talented was where it was all at. But actually what was really interesting was the kids that we really were impacting was those disaffected children, those ones, because what we were doing was changing how learning was happening. We were making it much more experiential learning, much more about what are you passionate about. Let's help you. Let's make the teacher a mentor and help you become that person that you want to be and find out about what you want. And so I was doing that, and then I absolutely loved it. I genuinely loved it. And I started then working on, well, something that didn't have a name, but it's then got called e-learning. And I was making e-learning content for governments and businesses around the world. And then my husband announced, as you do on a Tuesday, that we were moving to Zambia. And so off we went, and I carried on working at the research centre. And I came over from Zambia to run an international conference. And on the way back, there was this man in the airport, and he looked quite geeky, and he had this thing, and I didn't know what this thing was. So because we were British, obviously, we ended up, after being moved around the plane for various reasons, we ended up sitting next to each other. And because we're British, we obviously sat next to each other for 8 hours and didn't say a thing. And then in the 9th hour, curiosity killed the cat, and I finally said to him, what is that? And he said, oh, I'm glad you asked. It's an e-reader. This shows how old we are, for those of you who are not as old as me, that's called a Kindle. And it had just come out of America, and he was seriously excited because it was his new toy. And he absolutely was a geeky, techie person. And it turns out he had the biggest internet service provider in Zambia at the time. And he was looking to change the way education took place in Africa. So he told me what he was going to do. And I clearly should not play poker because I clearly showed that what I thought he was going to do wasn't going to work. And he said to me, what would you do? So I told him. He said, come and do it. And he gave me a huge whack of money. And, for the next 10 years, I put the whole of primary education with a team onto a tablet for African kids to get international standard education in 9 languages, voiced and translated. So that was 5,000 pieces of interactive learning content for the kids and 12,000 lesson plans. But during that time, I kept seeing it. Those kids that couldn't access the learning, and it didn't make any sense. And then I saw the graph, C.A. Nelson's graph out of Harvard, Center on the Developing Child, of that learning in the first 1,000 days. And it was like a light bulb. It was like somebody put the lights on, and I realized that if we didn't do something to help parents really understand how important they are and quite the impact that they can make on their child's life outcomes, and I'm talking all parents. I'm not talking those parents who are sort of less involved. I'm talking all parents. And if we could do something to help them really understand the learning in the play that their baby was getting, so that if, for example, when you give your baby a rattle, you let the baby hold the rattle and they shake it. Look, it's the same as a pencil grip. So they're developing the muscles from being a baby holding a rattle that they're going to later need to hold their pencil. And if you go out for a walk with a toddler and you're looking and you pick up a berry and you really examine that berry deeply together and you really look closely, you're developing the focus and concentration and the discrimination skills that are later going to be needed to see the difference between B and D. And it's understanding that. And if you go as a parent now on a walk with a toddler, you take time and you give them time, because you understand that it's not just about filling time and wasting time. It's actually about these amazing learning opportunities that your baby is getting and you are giving to your child. What a gift. So that's kind of where I came from and why I created the app.
What a fascinating story. And it's quite nice because we've spoken before and you've touched on a few of those points, but not quite in as much detail. So it's really interesting to hear that whole journey. And I think for everybody listening here is that, sometimes that curious journey, as I like to call it, can take time. It can lead you in places that you don't necessarily think. And I think it's okay to not follow a specific path. Your destination may not be known to you just yet, or, you may find that you have to go and explore a few different things before you get to your destination. And that's okay. And I think, it's really a fascinating way of sharing. That's why I love sharing people's stories, because it really helps.
There's no way my journey could have happened, and there's no way I could have got to where I've got to without every single part of the jigsaw being there. And I think that's something for everybody to realise, that every bit of your journey, even if it feels like you went down a rabbit hole and came back out again, it's given you something that's going to help build your next steps.
Yeah.
Make you and make your experience unique.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, my mum's always been saying, she's like, I wish you'd have finished university, because I went to university. I studied engineering. I didn't finish my degree. I passed my end of year exams, but I decided that I did not learn very well in an institutional environment. I didn't learn well at school. I didn't learn well at university. And yeah, I definitely learned better through experiencing things. I always have done. And I think it was only recently that I was like, you know what, that's okay. And a big pivotal point for me, I did a rowing coaching qualification years ago, and I was a terrible manager, like really, really bad. I was like, what? You don't just go from A to Z in each of the steps. You can miss out a few. You don't have to do it this way. And I could never really understand that not everybody learnt in the same way and not everybody did things in the same way. So I just got frustrated. So then I did this rowing coaching qualification, and then I was like, you know what, actually people have different learning styles, and that's okay, but you've just got to figure out what that learning style is and then develop it and work with it. And, I've, funnily enough, ended up becoming a great manager and a great leader.
Through the experience. It's
exactly
that experiential learning that's so important.
And I keep saying to my mum, I was like, yeah, fair enough. I didn't end up with a degree, but if I hadn't have gone to university, that wouldn't have given me that type of learning. And I'm thankful for every experience, both good and bad. And I think I would hope that a lot more people start realizing that those experiences help shape you, and that you don't need to wish that you did something differently or regret something, because it just might just take you a little bit longer to get to where you're going.
Yeah. And you know what? I was... somebody had a question on LinkedIn this morning. What would you tell your younger self if you could? And I think mine are two things. One is believe in yourself, and the other, because there's a whole heap of time wasted in not believing in yourself, and the other would be that it will work out in the end. And if we knew that at the beginning, we wouldn't have to worry about it. Because it will. It absolutely will. It's about tenacity. It's about sticking at it. And it's about following your passion. If you find your passion, I think you've unlocked the whole thing. I think Ken Robinson, God bless that man. Ken Robinson, think he's kind of a god, up there with Jack Shenkoff. And he talks about creativity and the importance of finding your passion. And if you unlock your passion, you've unlocked everything, really.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's wonderful. So I want to talk a lot more about to what's got you to where you are today. And also, if any of our listeners, because I know we do have listeners that have got this idea, they've got this passion, but they're not quite sure how to get it off the ground, how to get it started. So what advice would you give to somebody else that's got the same passion that you've got, mm-hmm. and that wants to either turn their ideas into an app or into reality? Like, what advice would you give based on your own experience?
Put a little bit more time in the preparation than I did. So I thought I knew how to build an app, because I'd obviously done this massive app before, but I'd done that with a massive team. Having the idea is not having the app. It's not having the outcome. The journey to the outcome for me has been huge, and the learning that's happened on the way has been absolutely massive. I think having a map in your mind and written down somewhere, planned out, get some paper and map out what you think this app looks like. If you're going for an app, what you think it looks like, even down to, if I press this button, what happens next? And you have to be really, really logical, which is not my forte. So that I didn't do, somebody else did, and that's great. It was really nice that my app developers did that, and they were really good at doing it. But what ended up happening was that I didn't get what I was hoping to get along the way every time. So it's a bit like building a house without a blueprint of what you're going to do, without an architect's drawing. You make costly mistakes. So the more you can put in the planning, the better, I would say. Get a really strong relationship with your tech team. I was really lucky with who I used. I know them, and they know me, not really well, but that we knew each other. But investigate, because everybody can produce. All tech companies can produce an app. It's a little bit like finding an architect. Are they going to produce the building that you want at the end of it? And so it's worth doing that investigation and spending the time in the preparation. And the other thing I would say is, don't delay in starting building your audience, because you don't have to have the product in your hand before you start talking and building the passion. And that is quite a mind muddle, and something I think people really struggle with. And do you know what's really sad? I'm going to now tell you how I worked that out.
Oh, before you do, I'm just going to say, like, for anybody listening to this and not watching the video, I'm like, it's, music to my ears, because so many companies that I speak to and so many individuals that want to launch a new business or launch a new app or a new product or a new service keep it really quiet and really, really hidden up to the point where it's ready to go to market. And I'm like, no, don't do that. You want to develop that audience. You want to, sort of put out teaser campaigns. You want to let people know what you're doing, get them excited about it. So when you're ready to launch it and you're ready to give it out to the market, to your ideal customers, that they actually want it and they lap it up. You don't want to end up with, you're really excited about your product launch, you put it out there and then there's crickets. That's not what you want.
In fact, the best example I've ever seen of this was when Orange launched. You're probably too young, Charlie.
No, I do remember. I don't remember the exact launch, but yeah, mobile phones weren't a thing when I was a kid. No, I'm older than I look.
And what they had was these boxes that kept coming on the TV, and it was just an orange box, and it would just go away, and then it would come back in, and then after a month it might say, the future's bright, the future's orange. And it was like, I remember asking people, what is orange? And then eventually we found out what it was. And it was kind of like a household name before it was anything. Very, very clever marketing. And I wish I'd done that, and I didn't. And therefore, there was a whole lot of time when I had a product and no audience. And it's just a waste of time. And a lot of it is about that self-confidence, that self-belief. And if you're going for it, go for it. And the other thing I would say to people is to know that building an app, you're building a business. I hadn't connected that dot either. I had an idea. I didn't have a business.
So what was your key learning in that process then?
If I was doing it again, before you start an audience. Like, before you do anything else, start talking about it and see where it falls. Yeah. And get yourself out in that space. There's no one else going to steal your idea, because you're not going to give your idea away, but what you're going to do is start talking about it and making noise and getting known in that space.
That's a really key point, a really great point, and thank you for bringing it up, which is that nobody's going to steal your idea. Because if you think about how much work and energy and preparation that goes into developing an app, so many people don't have the right motivation to do that, even if they want to copy your idea, and they don't have your knowledge and skills, and they don't have the resources that you've put into it. So there's a lot of people that are really worried about their competition, and I'm a huge advocate for collaboration over competition, because more often than not, you're future competitors or assumed competitors can actually be your biggest advocates and your biggest collaborative partners.
Yeah. And I've heard like James Wedmore will often say, who I think's fab, if there's competition, that means you're in the right space.
Yeah.
Because if there's no competition, that's when you need to worry.
Yeah, you have to wonder why somebody's not done this before.
Yeah. And I think, no one's doing exactly the same as you. Even if you are in the same space, you're doing it differently, and you are not going to suit everybody. That you're just not. You're going to suit some people some of the time. So therefore, get those people to follow you, doing it your way, and you've got your audience. You don't need everybody. You need some people who are behind you and follow your dream.
So this leads us on to our next point, which is what we've spoken about in the past, which is all around using partners and agents to help you sell your product. Because your product is B2C through and through. You are targeting the end user. But can you talk to us a little bit about your process of working with other people and other organisations, other businesses to help you get your product to market?
So the reason I did my app was to make impact and change, and I can't do that alone, because there's just no way I can build the audience big enough to make the impact that I want to make. And if you think there are a third of the children around the world won't reach their full potential, we've got a whole heap of people out there that we could reach. And like I say, I can't do it alone. So I want to do it in partnership with people. And that's why I have an affiliate program where people who already have the audience and are already talking to the end customer can put a link to my app onto their website. And that means that people can buy the app through them. They can be, the benefit for the business user is that they are, it's an evidence-based app. So it is grounded in research and science, and it's written by proper experts who know what they're talking about. So that means that their business gets a real solid foundation as well, and they can be talking about the science and the important stuff, and telling their parents the news that the parent is so important. So they're helping to really spread that news, while also so they're making impact to the parent, but they're also earning a little bit of bucks on the side through the process. So yes, we have an affiliate link that we can share with people so that they can put it on their website.
So you're adding value to their business and giving them a kickback as well. So there's a lot of value in that. It's not just about the money. The money helps, but it's not just. It's all about adding value.
And also the parent gets it for a cheaper price via the affiliate process as well. So everybody's kind of winning in the process.
Brilliant. And you're going to give me some links and some information about that. If anybody's listening and wants to find out more, then everything is on the show notes on my website. So that's charliewyman.com/podcast. So you talked a lot about the journey and sort of like making a few mistakes and, looking back, wanting to do things differently. So if you're going to give some more advice to somebody that was going down the same journey, what would you recommend that they do so they can kind of avoid hitting the same roadblocks that you did?
I think having, if you can get a team to work with you, do, because being able to talk to people is really important. And I have had an amazing support along the way. I've also gone out to there's quite a lot of incubators and various things out there that really help. So I went to Educate, UCL's University College London Educate, and because research is in my blood, and that's an EdTech accelerator which has a focus on research. So my product is absolutely grounded in research, but it's always also continuing to have research done on it by me, but also external researchers, because I think it's so important that my subject matter is grounded in the cutting edge of research, but also because what I've done is so cutting edge. There's kind of nothing else really around that does what I've done. So the researchers are all quite interested in collaborative learning that way. And the other, so go to an accelerator, don't be frightened by the accelerator, because I think it's really easy to think, oh, what's an accelerator? I'm not good enough. I need to be better than I am before I can go, because their job is, I actually started off at the local business hub. And my first one was how to be your own boss. And I remember going into the room, and it was a horseshoe of chairs with not a lot of space. You kind of had to feed in. And I ended up in the middle at the back. And I realized that we were going to have to do a pitch. And if I could have got out of that room, I absolutely would have done, because I felt so unsure about what I was doing and so underconfident. I never even said the name of my business out loud before. And there I was, suddenly having to do a 90-minute pitch, a 90-second pitch.
I was going to say 90-minute pitch. That
would have been 20 seconds. But by doing that, and doing it again and again and again and again, it becomes much, much easier, and it becomes second nature. You hone it, you know what you're doing. So that's what I would say. And the other thing I would say is get a mentor.
Yeah. Brilliant advice, especially on pitching though, because I think a lot of people think, right, okay, I need to get the pitch right before I deliver it, and then that's going to be it. But in business, doesn't matter what business you're in, you are always pitching every single day. Every time you talk about your business, you're essentially pitching. And, you know, it is all about like just refining that message, getting it right, looking at people's body languages, looking at people's eye contact and like how they respond to that, and just tweaking and changing as you go. Absolutely. So yeah, just keep practicing.
The other thing I think I would say is go for awards, and for lots of reasons, but go for local ones that aren't too stressy. So I went for the Lord Lieutenant of Hertfordshire's Enterprise Challenge last year, and I had no idea what I was letting myself in for, to be honest, and then discovered that it was a pitch at the palace style, though we probably aren't allowed to talk about that anymore. But it was a 3-minute pitch and 3 days of showing at the county show. So the experience I got through that process was massive. I had to write a proper 3-minute pitch. I had to talk about what I wanted out of the process, what learning I was going to get. I had to talk to the public at the show. I ended up coming second for the main prize, and I got the People's Award, which was really lovely to come away with, which means that it can go on my email footers, it can go on my website, it can go, you know, it's all good stuff. But beyond all of that, and the publicity that it brought, it built relationships, it launched me into my community, and it gave me a little bit of a confidence boost that maybe I hadn't had such a stupid idea, and that maybe this was going to be okay, because the demons in the head are shockers if you allow them.
And we all have them. You know, having your own business is quite a lonely place, really, isn't it? So yeah.
And that was another lovely thing. There were 10 of us. So we all built up a relationship over 3 days, stood in a tent, you know, in a field, as you do. But so it is absolutely worth going for those awards, I think.
Oh, brilliant advice. And also leads me into my next question, which is, what have been your most successful routes to market? Because we all know that starting a business, especially with an app, you know, marketing budgets are quite hard to come by. So what's been your most successful route to market or marketing plan?
The ones I've tried are baby shows and Facebook advertising, general marketing as in social marketing, but my most successful is where I build relationships, and it's building those relationships with other people and helping solve their problems. So finding other businesses who that know about the first 1,000 days of life but don't kind of know how to help their parents use that information has been the best way.
That's such a key piece of learning there, isn't it? You know, find other businesses that know and understand the problem that you're solving, but don't have the capability or the knowledge to solve that problem themselves. You know.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is that you don't make sales behind your computer.
Very true.
You have to get out, and whether that's virtually And I mean, I remember getting to a point where I realized that I wasn't going to make any sales behind my computer because, I had tried to sit there quietly and wait for the world to find me. But the first time I phoned 3 charities who work in this area. And I had it on my plan for the week, and it was now Friday at 3:30. That's how scary it was. And in the end, it was like, well, you're not leaving a leaky HQ until you have phoned these people. So best you get on with it. So I did. And not one of them laughed. In fact,
shocking, that, isn't it?
all 3 of them went, oh, that sounds really interesting. Now, actually, I didn't make any sales. It doesn't actually matter. I started. And that was the key from that experience.
It made it a little bit less terrifying.
Yeah. And the other thing about it was that I then just kept going because I couldn't allow myself to stop. And it's taken a long time. But what happened, because inevitably you've got summer holidays, or you've got Christmas, or you've got half term, or there's all sorts of reasons why business can't happen. But by putting those dates in diaries, you start a ball rolling. And you may not see those immediate results, but you will see those results in time. And it's absolutely worth building those relationships and getting out.
And it's quite scary for a lot of people that, picking up the phone and talking about your business or finding out who you get to the right person. A lot of people come to me and sort of saying, I don't want to come across as too salesy or too spammy. And it's like, well, what happens if you don't talk to people about it? You're not helping anybody, you're not serving anybody. So what's the worst that could happen? They say no.
Yes, and actually I heard you talking about your photocopiers. No, they were special copiers for the police.
Laser scanners,
that's right. And you were saying that it wasn't about pitching the laser scanner, it was about solving their problems. And when you started talking about that, you won 23 of the 25 or something?
I think it was 26 out of the 32. It was that was a huge achievement because we were just a small company. We were going up against a huge company with a massive budget and a very large sales team. But I think for us, the biggest success with that was understanding the language that our audience spoke, because it was a different audience to what we were used to. So when we first went into that opportunity, we were talking to them in the language that we were used to speaking to our customers about, and nobody got it. And also that we were talking to a really hard audience that didn't want the technology we were selling, but they had to have it. So they didn't want it, So we had to find out how to, make them interested in what it was that we were trying to show them, and then try to show them the benefits to them, both as an organization and also as an individual. So, especially with B2B sales and marketing, it's not just about looking at the organization and thinking, right, okay, what are the benefits to that organization? It's also about profiling the people that you're selling to and then understanding how you can help them, because their motivations are not always the same as the business, the organization's motivations. So for me, I was like, oh, this is so interesting, especially from the psychology point of view. But yeah, it was a very successful, very stressful, but also very exciting process, because that technology really did help so many people, and a lot of things that you don't necessarily realize. There were a lot of benefits to industry, to the individual that nobody is aware of and nobody sees. So yeah, I think it's just about asking questions. The more questions you can ask, the better.
Yeah. And probably you turned your marketing on a 9-pin. So you'd been doing one thing one day and then you completely changed it the next day. And yet you didn't lose those customers. In fact, you gained those customers.
Yeah.
So the customers were there. They sort of were listening, but not. And then you got them.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of really jumping in at the deep end, because we were doing something that we had never done before. We didn't understand. And it was like every day was a learning day. And yes, you made mistakes, but you learned from them and you had to learn very quickly. And for me, that's one of the biggest benefits of working for a small company, is that you can pivot really quickly. You can be very, very responsive. So you can be very proactive and very reactive as well, but then also have the flexibility to make decisions. You don't have to then jump through hoops to get things approved and, process changed and things like that. Because I am not a lover of process. If somebody tells me to do something in one way, I'm like, yeah, there's a better way of doing that, I'm sure. Let me go and try it out.
What, just for the sake of it? Yeah.
I was that nightmare child at school that was just like, why are we doing this again? What benefit has this got in any shape or form? And like the teachers like they're glaring at me going, you're ruining my class, why are you doing this? But yeah, lots of fun. Cool. So we're coming up to time now, and it's been absolutely wonderful speaking to you. There are so many nuggets of advice and wisdom that are coming from this interview. So again, if you are listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm driving or I'm on my way to somewhere, the show notes are on my website, so you can get a good summary there. Are there any parting words of wisdom or any recommendations that you want to give to our listeners before we go?
Be playful. Be playful in your life. Be playful with your friends, with your people, with your children. Be playful with yourself. It's all very easy to be terribly serious, but actually it's in playfulness that we find our most exciting moments.
Love it. And if anybody wants to find out more about you or Aliki, where do they go? What do they do?
Aliki.com is my website, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Though on Twitter, I am unfortunately Aliki_learning. But other than that, I'm at Aliki everywhere else. And Aliki is one of those random words that I made up. Doesn't mean anything, except it means that you can get the .com, and it looks cute in a logo. But I discovered that it's actually a nightmare name because there's 3 I's in Aliki, so it's OLIIKI. And my Clare has no I, so it turns out to be a complete nightmare of a name. But aliki.com is where you find me.
Brilliant. And yes, all of the information is on the show notes. So thank you so much, Clare. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope our listeners enjoyed this interview as much as I did.
Charlie, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Brilliant. Thank you.